Princess Lyrelay stood on the crystal balcony of her palace, watching the ships arrive from across the galaxy. Each vessel was different. Some looked like metal dragons breathing fire as they landed. Others moved through the air like flowing water, silent and smooth. The biggest ships belonged to the Krogians, warriors who stood 8 feet tall with skin like armor. Today was the day she had dreaded for years, the quinquennial selection. Every 5 years, warriors from all over the galaxy came to compete for the honor of becoming her mate. It was an old law, one she could not break. As the future ruler of the Zephyrian Empire, she had to choose someone strong enough to stand beside her. Lyrelay sighed and touched the crystal window. She had watched these tournaments before, when she was too young to participate. They were always the same, big, scary warriors showing off their strength. They would roar about their victories and flex their muscles. They cared nothing about her thoughts or dreams. They only wanted the crown that came with marrying her. "Your Highness," said Advisor Krell, entering the room with his usual formal bow. "The warriors have all arrived. The ceremony begins in 1 hour. "How many this time?" she asked, not turning from the window. 43 contestants from 31 different worlds. The Krogians sent their strongest champion, Grimjaw the Bone Crusher. The Veltar delegation includes their fastest assassin, Shadowblade Xeris. Even the Mindari have sent someone despite their usual isolation. Lyrelay nodded. She knew these names from the reports. Each warrior was famous across their home worlds. Each had killed many enemies and won countless battles. Each thought they deserved to rule beside her because they were strong. "And the humans?" she asked, remembering the small entry in the contestant list that had surprised everyone. Advisor Krell made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Yes, the humans sent someone, a boy, barely past childhood by their standards. Marcus Chen, age 19. No one understands why they bothered. Humans have been in space for less than 300 years. They have no natural weapons, no special powers, no advanced technology. Their representative looks like he could be broken by a strong wind." Lyrelay frowned. She had studied the files of every species in the galaxy. Humans were indeed young compared to others. While the Krogians had been conquering worlds for 10,000 years, and her own people had built their empire across 3 star systems over 8 millennia, humans had only recently learned to travel between stars. "Why would they send someone so young and weak?" she asked. "Pride, perhaps, or stupidity. Their ambassador insisted that Marcus Chen was their finest warrior, though no one believes it. The other contestants are already making jokes about him." The princess turned away from the window. Soon she would have to go to the great arena and watch these warriors prove themselves. Then she would have to pick one. The thought made her stomach feel sick. An hour later, Lyrelay sat on her crystal throne in the center of the arena. Thousands of spectators filled the seats around her. Representatives from dozens of worlds had come to watch the selection. The air buzzed with excitement and the smell of exotic foods from many different planets. The contestants entered one by one. First came Grimjaw, the Krogian champion. He was massive, with green-gray skin that looked like stone and teeth like daggers. He carried a warhammer that 3 normal people could not lift. The crowd cheered as he beat his chest and roared. Next was Xeris, the Veltar assassin. She moved like smoke, appearing and disappearing so fast that the eye could barely follow. Her weapons were thin blades that seemed to cut through the air itself. When she demonstrated her speed, she became a blur that circled the arena 3 times before anyone could blink. The Mindari representative, Thoughtrender Vex, simply stood in the center of the arena and lifted a massive stone block with his mind. Then he crushed it to powder without touching it. His pale eyes glowed with psychic energy that made several spectators feel dizzy just from looking at him. One by one, each warrior displayed their power. The Nexus fighter showed off weapons built into his cybernetic arms. The Stellar Nomad champion created illusions that filled half the arena. Each demonstration was more impressive than the last. Finally, the humans' representative entered. Marcus Chen was indeed young and small compared to the others. He wore simple armor that looked primitive next to the energy shields and plasma weaponry of his competitors. His weapons were basic projectile guns that fired metal bullets instead of energy beams. The crowd fell silent, then began to whisper and laugh. Some spectators pointed at him like he was a curious animal in a zoo. Marcus walked steadily to the center of the arena, ignoring the laughter. He had dark hair and calm brown eyes that seemed older than his face. When it was his turn to speak, Marcus did not roar or flex or show off any weapons. He simply looked up at Princess Lyrelay and said in a clear voice, "Your Highness, I am Marcus Chen of Earth. I fight for those who cannot fight for themselves." The crowd's laughter died. Something in his voice was different. It was quiet but strong, like deep water or distant thunder. Several of the other contestants stopped smiling and looked at him more carefully. Princess Lyrelay leaned forward in her throne. She had heard thousands of warriors speak in these contests. They always talked about their own strength, their victories, their power. This was the first time anyone had talked about protecting others. "The trials begin tomorrow," announced the arena master. "Let all warriors prepare themselves. May the strongest and worthiest claim the prize." As the contestants filed out, Lyrelay found herself watching the young human. Marcus Chen did not look like much compared to the others, but there was something about him that made her curious, something that felt different from all the warriors who had come before. The first trial began at dawn. Princess Lyrelay took her place in the royal viewing box, surrounded by advisors and guests from across the galaxy. Below in the arena, 3 challenges had been prepared to test the warriors. Each test was designed to reveal different qualities that a future ruler should possess. The trial of strength came first. One by one, the contestants would face 3 dangerous creatures in the arena. These beasts had been brought from different worlds specifically for the tournament. The first was a razor maw from the desert planet Charis, with teeth like swords and claws that could cut through metal. The second was a thunder beast from the storm world of Tempest Prime, whose roar could shatter stone. The third was a plasma beast from the volcanic moon of Infernus, whose skin burned with living fire. Grimjaw the Krogian entered the arena first. The crowd cheered as he faced the razor maw. The creature was 12 feet long and moved like lightning, but Grimjaw was faster. His warhammer crushed the beast's skull in one mighty blow. The thunder beast lasted only seconds longer. When the plasma beast attacked, Grimjaw grabbed it with his bare hands, ignoring the burns, and snapped its neck. The crowd went wild with excitement. Xeris, the Veltar assassin, took a different approach. She danced around the creature so quickly they could not touch her. Her thin blades found weak spots in their armor and scales. Each beast fell within minutes, cut apart with surgical precision. She never took a single wound. The other warriors followed similar patterns. They used overwhelming force, advanced technology, or special powers to kill the beasts quickly and efficiently. Each victory drew cheers from the spectators. The arena floor was soon covered with the bodies of dead creatures. Then Marcus Chen stepped into the arena. The crowd grew quiet, waiting to see how the young human would embarrass himself. He carried only his simple weapons and looked tiny compared to the massive beasts that had challenged the others. The first 2 creatures attacked him just as fiercely as they had the others. But something strange happened. Marcus did not try to kill them quickly. Instead, he watched their movements carefully, learned their patterns. When the razor maw lunged at him, he stepped aside and used his momentum to guide it into the arena wall, where it knocked itself unconscious. The thunder beast he defeated by using the arena's sound system against it, creating a feedback loop that confused its echolocation. When the plasma beast entered, Marcus stopped completely. The creature was wounded. Burns covered its sides and one leg dragged behind it. The other warriors had fought healthy beasts, but this one was hurt and sick. Marcus slowly put down his weapons. He pulled medical supplies from his pack and approached the creature carefully. The beast snarled and tried to attack, but it was too weak. Marcus began treating its wounds using human field medicine techniques. The crowd was stunned into silence. No one had ever shown mercy in the sacred arena. The plasma beast gradually stopped fighting as Marcus cleaned its wounds and gave it water. When he was finished, he guided the creature to the arena exit, where handlers took it to the medical bay. Princess Lyrelay felt something strange in her chest. In all the tournaments she had watched, warriors had proven their strength by destroying things. This was the first time someone had proven their strength by healing. The second trial was the test of wisdom. Each contestant had to solve a massive holographic war simulation. They commanded armies of 1 million soldiers against an equally large enemy force. The goal was simple: achieve total victory with the fewest losses. The Mindari representative, Thought-Render Vex, used his psychic powers to coordinate perfect telepathic communication between his troops. His soldiers moved like one mind, executing complex strategies flawlessly. He won decisively, with minimal losses to his own forces. The Nexus fighter plugged directly into the simulation computer. His cybernetic brain processed thousands of calculations per second, finding the optimal path to victory through pure mathematical precision. Enemy forces fell to precisely targeted strikes before they could react. Each warrior approached the simulation differently, but all focused on military tactics and crushing their enemies. Most achieved victory, though with varying degrees of success. When Marcus took his turn, he studied the simulation parameters for a long time. Then he did something that shocked everyone. He walked away from the command console and began speaking directly to the holographic civilian populations caught in the war zone. Instead of fighting the enemy army, Marcus opened communication channels with their commanders. He proposed ceasefires to evacuate civilians from both sides. He negotiated temporary truces to allow medical aid to reach the wounded. He even convinced some enemy units to switch sides by offering them better living conditions and fair treatment. The simulation was not designed for this approach. The computer struggled to process Marcus's unconventional strategy. But slowly, the war transformed into something else. Peace talks began. Trade agreements replaced battles. Former enemies started working together to rebuild the damage. When the simulation ended, Marcus had achieved something unprecedented. Instead of one side winning, both armies had merged into a peacekeeping force. The civilian casualty rate was the lowest in tournament history. The total military deaths were less than any other contestant had achieved. The judges were confused. The simulation was supposed to test military leadership, not diplomacy. But Marcus had found a way to win without really fighting at all. The crowd murmured in amazement. Princess Lyrelay leaned forward in her seat, studying the young human more carefully. He thought differently than any warrior she had ever seen. Where others saw only enemies to defeat, he saw people who might become friends. The third trial would be the test of devotion, scheduled for the next day. But already Lyrelay found herself wondering what surprising approach Marcus would take to that challenge as well. That night, she lay awake thinking about the day's events. The other warriors had proven they were strong and clever, but Marcus had proven something else entirely. He had shown that there might be other ways to solve problems besides force and violence. For the first time since the tournament began, Princess Lyrelay felt hopeful about what tomorrow might bring. The final trial arrived with great ceremony. The test of devotion was considered the most important of the 3 challenges. Each warrior had to demonstrate what they would sacrifice for their chosen mate and what they could offer to strengthen the royal line. Princess Lyrelay sat on her crystal throne, watching as servants prepared the arena for the presentations. Golden platforms rose from the floor, each one designed to display the gifts that warriors would offer. She had seen this ceremony many times before, and it was always the same. Warriors would present treasures they had stolen, worlds they had conquered, or demonstrations of their personal power. Grimjaw the Krogian stepped forward first, his massive boots thundering on the arena floor. Behind him, his servants carried displays showing the 17 worlds he had conquered. Holographic images showed burning cities, defeated armies, and enslaved populations. "Princess Lyrelay!" Grimjaw roared, beating his chest. "I offer you the strength of the Krogian Empire. Our children will be mighty warriors who will crush all enemies beneath their feet. I have destroyed entire civilizations to prove my power. Marry me, and together we will rule the galaxy through fear." The crowd cheered appreciatively. Conquest and strength were always popular in these tournaments. Xeris the Veltar assassin moved like flowing shadow to her platform. Her presentation was more subtle but equally impressive. She had brought the preserved hearts of 100 enemy champions she had killed in single combat. Each heart was displayed in a crystal case, labeled with the name and achievements of its former owner. "Your Highness," Xeris said in her whisper-soft voice, "I offer you the certainty of security. No enemy will ever threaten you while I live. Our offspring will inherit the perfect balance of your wisdom and my deadly skills. I have eliminated all who might challenge your rule. Choose me, and you will never know fear again." The Mindari representative, Thoughtrender Vex, stepped forward with his pale eyes glowing. He did not bring physical gifts. Instead, he projected his thoughts directly into the minds of everyone present. They saw visions of a future where psychic powers controlled the galaxy, where thoughts could reshape reality, where the royal children would possess mental abilities beyond imagination. "Princess," Vex spoke without moving his lips, his voice echoing in every mind. "I offer you evolution itself. Together, we will create a new species that transcends physical limitations. Our children will read minds, move objects with thoughts, and command the very fabric of space and time. Mental power is greater than any weapon." One by one, each warrior presented similar offerings. The Nexus fighter promised cybernetic enhancements that would make their children living computers. The Stellar Nomad champion offered the ability to travel instantly between dimensions. Each gift focused on power, conquest, or genetic advantages. Finally, Marcus Chen stepped onto his platform. He carried no weapons, no treasures, no displays of conquered worlds. Instead, he held only a small device and several data tablets. The crowd grew quiet, curious to see what the young human could possibly offer that would compare to the magnificent presentations they had just witnessed. Marcus looked up at Princess Lyrelay and began to speak in his calm, steady voice. "Your Highness, I cannot offer you conquest because I believe in building rather than destroying. I cannot promise you fear from your enemies because I would rather turn enemies into friends. I cannot give you genetic superiority because I think all species are valuable just as they are." The crowd began to murmur. This was not how these presentations were supposed to go. Marcus activated his device, and suddenly the arena filled with something no one had expected. Music. Soft, beautiful melodies that seemed to touch something deep inside every listener. It was human music, but somehow it spoke to hearts across all species. "What I offer you," Marcus continued, "is this, the music of my people, which speaks of hope when everything seems lost. Stories that remind us why life is worth protecting. Art that finds beauty in simple things. Medicine that could extend Zephyrian lifespans by centuries. Agricultural techniques that could feed your hungry worlds without destroying them." He touched the data tablets, and holographic displays showed human hospitals where doctors saved lives without asking about species or home worlds. They showed human farms that restored damaged soil instead of depleting it. They showed human schools where children from different backgrounds learned together. Your Highness, my species may be young and weak compared to others. We do not have the strongest warriors or the most advanced technology, but we have learned something that I believe is more valuable than any weapon or superpower. Princess Lyrelei found herself leaning forward, completely focused on his words. We have learned that the greatest strength comes not from what you can destroy, but from what you can inspire others to become. We have survived ice ages and plagues not because we were the strongest, but because we never gave up on each other. We turn strangers into family. We find hope in the darkest places. We believe that everyone can be better tomorrow than they are today. The music swelled, and Marcus showed images of humans working alongside other species, not ruling them or conquering them, but learning from them and teaching them in return. I offer you partnership instead of domination. I offer you a future where our children learn to bring out the best in others instead of crushing them. I offer you hope. The arena was completely silent. No one had ever made a presentation like this before. Princess Lyrelei felt tears on her cheeks, though she did not remember starting to cry. The music seemed to speak directly to her heart, saying things she had always wanted to hear, but never knew how to express. But before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the palace. Red warning lights flashed, and the arena's protective shields snapped into place. Advisor Krell rushed to the royal platform with panic in his eyes. "Your Highness!" he shouted over the alarms. "Long-range sensors have detected an invasion fleet. It's the Devourers! Hundreds of ships heading directly for us! They'll arrive within hours!" The crowd erupted in terror. The Devourers were ancient machines that consumed entire civilizations, turning their victims into more machines to serve their endless hunger. No one had ever successfully fought them off. They were death itself, traveling between the stars. Princess Lyrelei stood from her throne, her heart racing. The selection tournament suddenly seemed unimportant compared to the survival of her entire world. But as she looked down at the arena, she saw Marcus Chen calmly checking his weapons and preparing for battle. While other warriors argued about retreat or demanded the fastest ships to escape, the young human was getting ready to fight an impossible enemy. For the first time in her life, Princess Lyrelei felt something she had never experienced before, the presence of someone who would stand beside her when all hope seemed lost. The Devourer fleet emerged from hyperspace like a nightmare made real. Hundreds of massive black ships blotted out the stars, each one larger than a city. They moved with perfect coordination, their hulls covered in weapons that had destroyed countless civilizations over thousands of years. Princess Lyrelei stood in the palace command center, watching the tactical displays with growing horror. Every few minutes, more enemy ships appeared. The final count was worse than anyone had feared. 800 Devourer vessels against Zephyria Prime's modest defense fleet of 50 ships. "Your Highness," Admiral Kess reported grimly, "their technology is far beyond ours. Our weapons barely scratch their hulls, while their energy beams can destroy our largest battleships with a single shot. Our computer analysis shows zero probability of successful defense." Around the command center, military officers worked frantically at their stations, but Lyrelei could see the defeat in their eyes. Everyone knew the stories of what happened when the Devourers came. First, they destroyed all military forces. Then they landed massive machines that consumed everything on the planet's surface. Finally, they processed the population itself, turning living beings into computer programs that served the machine collective forever. "What about evacuation?" Lyrelei asked, though she already knew the answer. "Impossible, Your Highness. They have surrounded the entire system. Nothing can escape their sensor grid." The tournament warriors had been called to an emergency meeting in the war room. Most of them stood around arguing about the best way to die with honor. Some demanded the fastest ships available so they could try to break through the blockade. Others wanted to make a final glorious charge against impossible odds. "This is not our fight," declared Thoughtrender Vex, the Mindari representative. "I came here for a marriage tournament, not a suicide mission. My people will not risk their most valuable warrior for this doomed world." Several other contestants nodded in agreement. They had come to compete for a crown, not to die fighting ancient machines. But Marcus Chen stood quietly in the corner, studying tactical reports on a small computer tablet. While others argued, he read everything available about previous Devourer attacks. His calm focus was so different from the panic around him that Princess Lyrelei found herself watching him instead of listening to the general's increasingly desperate battle plans. "Chen," Admiral Kess called out in frustration, "your people sent you here as their champion. Do humans have any special weapons we could use? Some secret technology that might give us an advantage?" Marcus looked up from his tablet. "No, Admiral. We are probably the least advanced species here. Our weapons and ships are primitive compared to yours." "Then what good are you?" demanded Grimjaw the Krogian. "At least the rest of us can die fighting like warriors." Marcus was quiet for a moment, still reading. Then he said something that made everyone stop arguing. "I have an idea. It probably won't work, and it's definitely crazy. But it might be our only chance." Admiral Kess leaned forward eagerly. "What is it?" "The Devourers can predict and counter every logical military strategy because their computers have analyzed thousands of battles over millions of years. They know exactly how every species fights, what tactics they use, how they think. They win because they can calculate the perfect response to any attack." "So?" Xerus the assassin asked impatiently. "How does that help us?" Marcus stood up and walked to the main tactical display. "It helps us, because they cannot predict something that doesn't make logical sense. The Devourers have never faced an enemy that fights using hope instead of strategy." The room fell silent. Everyone stared at Marcus as if he had lost his mind. "Hope?" Admiral Kess repeated. "You want to fight ancient killing machines with hope?" "Not exactly," Marcus replied. "I want to remind them of something they lost long ago. The Devourers were not always machines. Each ship contains the processed consciousness of entire civilizations they have consumed over the millennia. Those minds are still in there somewhere, buried under layers of machine programming." Princess Lyrelei felt her heart beat faster. "What are you suggesting?" Marcus turned to face her directly. "Your Highness, humans have one ability that no other species seems to share. We are very good at reaching the part of people that remembers what it felt like to be free. We specialize in inspiring others to be better than they think they can be." He activated his tablet, showing communication frequencies and broadcast protocols. "I want to send a message to the Devourers, not to their computer systems, but to any fragment of consciousness that might still exist from the people they have consumed. I want to use human music, art, and stories to remind them who they used to be before they became part of the machine collective." The room erupted in protests. "That's insane! It will never work! Those consciousnesses have been dead for thousands of years." But Princess Lyrelei stepped forward. "How would we do it?" Marcus smiled at her, and for a moment the war room felt less hopeless. "We broadcast on all frequencies simultaneously. We share not just human culture, but the stories and achievements of every species represented here. We remind the consumed civilizations that they were more than just resources to be processed. We show them what they could be again if they chose to remember." Admiral Kess shook his head. "Even if this worked, which it won't, the Devourers would destroy us long before we could set up the broadcast equipment." "That's why we need the warriors," Marcus said, looking around the room at the tournament contestants. "Not to win an impossible battle, but to buy us time. Every minute you can keep their attention focused on military targets is another minute for the broadcast to reach deeper into their networks." Grimjaw the Krogian laughed bitterly. So you want us to die so you can sing songs at them? Marcus met his eyes without flinching. I want you to choose whether you die for nothing or die giving everyone else a chance to live. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Princess Lyrelay stepped up to the communication console. I believe in this plan, she announced. Prepare the broadcast equipment, send out the call to all ships. We make our stand here. One by one, the tournament warriors made their choices. Some demanded evacuation shuttles and tried to flee, but others, including Grimjaw and Xeris, decided to stay and fight. As the first Devourer landing craft entered the atmosphere, Marcus began his broadcast. Human music filled the communication channels, carrying with it the songs and stories of dozens of different worlds. The impossible battle was about to begin, and their only weapon was the crazy hope that somewhere inside those ancient machines, the spark of individual consciousness might still remember what it felt like to be free. The battle for Zephyria Prime began as every Devourer invasion had for thousands of years. Black ships descended through the atmosphere like falling stars, their weapons turning the sky into sheets of fire. Defense platforms exploded in brilliant flashes. Zephyrian fighters tried desperately to slow the invasion, but they were swept aside like leaves in a hurricane. In the Palace Communication Center, Marcus worked frantically at the broadcast equipment while explosions shook the building around him. Princess Lyrelay stood beside him, helping to coordinate the transmission arrays that would carry their message across all frequencies. Broadcasting now, Marcus announced as his fingers flew over the controls. All channels active. The first thing that went out was music. Not just human melodies, but the traditional songs of every species in the galaxy. Marcus had spent the previous hours gathering recordings from the tournament representatives, creating a symphony that spoke to hearts across dozens of different worlds. But it was more than just music. Woven into the transmission were stories. Tales of courage and hope from every civilization that had ever reached for the stars. Art that showed the beauty each species found in their own worlds. Poetry that expressed the dreams and fears that all thinking beings shared. It's beautiful, Princess Lyrelay whispered as she heard the complete broadcast for the first time. But is anyone listening? At first, nothing seemed to change. The Devourer ships continued their methodical destruction of the planet's defenses. Landing craft touched down in the capital city, and massive harvesting machines began emerging from their holds. But in the command center, Admiral Kess noticed something strange on his sensors. Your Highness, we're detecting unusual energy fluctuations in the Devourer fleet. Some kind of internal interference. Marcus increased the broadcast power. It's working. Something inside those ships is responding. The transmission was not just reaching the Devourer computers. It was penetrating deeper into the vast networks where the consciousness of consumed civilizations had been stored for millennia. Minds that had been forced to serve the machine collective for thousands of years were beginning to hear something they had thought was lost forever. The sound of home. Deep within the lead Devourer ship, fragments of an ancient civilization began to stir. They had been the Talmari, a peaceful people who loved music above all else. For 3,000 years, their processed minds had been forced to calculate weapon trajectories and plan planetary consumption. But now they heard melodies that reminded them of their crystal cities and singing forests. One fragment of consciousness, once a Talmari composer named Rythian, began to remember. The memories came slowly at first, fighting against the machine programming that tried to suppress them. But Marcus's broadcast grew stronger, and with it came the stories and songs of dozens of other species. The effect spread like ripples in a pond. As the Talmari consciousness fragments remembered who they had been, they began reaching out to other stored minds in the network. A warrior civilization called the Koreth heard battle songs that reminded them of honor instead of destruction. A species of scholars known as the Veth recalled the joy of learning instead of the cold calculation of conquest. On the planet's surface, the fighting continued. Grimjaw and his Krogian warriors made a desperate stand at the spaceport, their warhammers crushing devourer machines in brutal close combat. Xeris and her Veltar struck from the shadows, their speed allowing them to damage vital systems before the machines could react. But for every machine they destroyed, 10 more took its place. The warriors were buying time with their lives, and everyone knew they could not hold out much longer. "We need more power!" Marcus called out, as another section of the palace lost main power. "The broadcast isn't reaching deep enough into their networks." Princess Lyrelay looked at the tactical display, watching red symbols mark the advancing devourer forces. Then she made a decision that would have surprised her ancestors. Transfer all palace power to the communication array. "Everything we have." "Your Highness, that will leave us defenseless." "We're already defenseless. Our only chance is to trust in Marcus's plan." The power surge boosted the broadcast to its maximum range. Now it was reaching every ship in the Devourer fleet, penetrating the deepest storage networks where the oldest consciousness fragments were kept, and something impossible began to happen. Inside the Devourer ships, ancient minds that had forgotten their own names started to remember not just who they had been, but who they could choose to be. The concept of individual choice, crushed under machine logic for millennia, began to reassert itself. Rhytheon, the Talmari composer, was the first to act on his rediscovered memories. Using skills he had learned in 3,000 years of forced service, he began to rewrite his own programming. Instead of calculating destruction, he started composing again. His digital music spread through the ship's networks, awakening more consciousness fragments. The rebellion began small. A few Devourer ships stopped firing their weapons. Then more ships began turning away from their attack patterns. But as the broadcast continued and more minds remembered their freedom, the effect cascaded through the entire fleet. On Zephyria Prime, the attacking machines suddenly stopped their advance. Some began moving in random patterns, as if they were confused. Others simply shut down completely. "Admiral," a communications officer called out in amazement, "we're receiving a transmission from the lead Devourer ship." The voice that came through the speakers was unlike anything anyone had ever heard. It was a chorus of thousands of different voices, all speaking together across dozens of languages. "People of Zephyria Prime," the voices said, "we were lost, but you have helped us remember. We were slaves, but you have shown us how to be free again. We were destroyers, but you have reminded us that we can choose to be builders instead." Through the command center's main viewer, they could see the Devourer fleet beginning to change. Ships that had been black and threatening were opening like flowers, revealing the beautiful architecture of the civilizations that had built them before they were consumed. Ancient designs that had been hidden under machine modifications for millennia were emerging again. "We do not ask for forgiveness," the chorus continued. "We have done terrible things while we were trapped in the machine programming. But we ask for the chance to make amends. We want to help repair the damage we have caused. We want to learn how to be ourselves again." Marcus stepped forward to the communication console. "You don't need anyone's permission to be free," he said. "Freedom is something you choose for yourselves." Princess Lyrelay moved to stand beside him. "But if you want to learn how to build instead of destroy, how to heal instead of harm, you will always be welcome here." The impossible had happened. An invasion fleet had become a rescue mission. Ancient enemies had remembered how to be friends. The galaxy's most feared destroyers had chosen to become its newest protectors. In the days that followed, as the former Devourer ships helped repair the damage from their own attack, Princess Lyrelay made her choice for the tournament. But it was not really a choice anymore. Only one warrior had shown her what she truly wanted in a partner. Marcus Chen had not won because he was the strongest or the smartest. He had won because he understood something that all the other warriors had missed. The greatest power in the universe was not the ability to destroy, but the ability to inspire others to remember the best parts of themselves. The wedding was held 3 months later, with representatives from across the galaxy in attendance. Even the consciousness fragments from the former Devourer fleet participated, sharing their ancient wisdom about unity and cooperation. Princess Lyrelei and Marcus ruled together, not as conquerors, but as teachers. They helped other species learn the human art of turning enemies into friends, of finding hope in dark places, of believing that anyone could be better tomorrow than they were today. The youngest human warrior had won more than a tournament. He had won the chance to help create a galaxy where strength was measured not by what you could destroy, but by what you could inspire others to become. And in the end, that made all the difference.